There's a short list of Batman the Animated Series episodes that people don't hold in high regard. Episodes like I've Got Batman in My Basement, my least favourite episode, and the story I want to talk about today, Cat Scratch Fever. I'm not going to sit here for 10 minutes and tell you that this is secretly an amazing episode, because it is not. But it's not the disaster that people make it out to be either. Granted, the animation is generally poor, no one can deny that. But beneath all that, there's a surprisingly sincere story about cruelty and how easy it is for people in power to justify it. At its core, Cat Scratch Fever is an animal rights story disguised as pulp. It opens with Selina Kyle looking for her lost cat and spirals into a plot about Roland Daggett trying to infect Gotham with a disease just to sell them the cure. It's cartoonish, yes, but it's also a scathing bit of commentary on corporate villainy. Daggett isn't theatrical like Joker or Two-Face. He's smug, banal, and completely soulless. All he cares about is his bottom line, regardless of the lives he destroys along the way. So on paper, it's a solid concept. But the animation, yeah, it's rough. Wonky expressions, clunky movement, and weird perspective. These are the hallmarks of notoriously shoddy studio ACOM. But at times, there's almost something accidentally brilliant about it. For instance, let's talk about the opening courtroom scene. For those that don't know, traditional animation was a careful blend of artistry and craftsmanship. Every scene had a painted background, a static canvas that established the environment, mood, and lighting for the shot. These backgrounds were often breathtaking works of art in their own right, rendered with the same attention to colour, texture, and perspective as a painting you might hang in a gallery. The characters, meanwhile, were handled entirely separately. Each movement, expression, or action was painted onto a separate transparent sheet of acetate. These animation cells would then be placed over the static background and photographed, then swapped for the next cell, allowing animators to make the characters move without altering the painstakingly crafted backdrop. Now, to get back to the courtroom scene. For the most part, the audience is painted on acetate cells, and they move. But then there's this shot at the end, where they have been painted into the background. Static, pinkish, meat-faced silhouettes that look like they wandered out of a Francis Bacon painting. It's an expressionistic nightmare. I mean, look at this dude! You can almost feel his eyes melting out of his skull. And I love it. I'm certain it wasn't intentional, but that's the strange beauty of Cat Scratch Fever. It's clumsy, but it lands somewhere unnervingly expressive. The grotesque stillness of that crowd shot gives the story a weirdly nightmarish texture, as if Gotham itself is quietly rotting under the surface. But it's not just that unintentional grotesque beauty that is worth highlighting. Thematically, the episode does something the show rarely gets credit for. It gives Batman and Catwoman a moment of vulnerability. She's sick, and he's desperate to save her, not out of heroics, but affection. There's tenderness beneath the mask, and Cat Scratch Fever lets us see it for once, even through the dodgy animation and feverish pacing. No, it's not Heart of Ice. It's not even Tiger Tiger. But it's still a story about empathy and shows how even a Saturday morning cartoon could take a stand, however awkwardly, against cruelty. Now, you may find yourself wondering why episodes like this came to be. Why couldn't every episode be a Heart of Ice, an On Leather Wings, or a Feet of Clay? Well, the answer is that the early days of Batman the Animated Series were far from smooth. Within the initial creative team, two distinct factions emerged. On the one side were producers Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, determined to push boundaries and stay true to the darker, more mature tone of the comics. On the other side were writers Sean Catherine Derrick and Lauren Bright, who, encouraged by some executives I should add, aimed to make the series more kid-friendly. This creative split is why the show's early episodes feel so uneven. You have chilling, emotionally complex stories like the aforementioned Heart of Ice and Feet of Clay, and then just a few episodes later you'd get lighter, less complex episodes like Prophecy of Doom and I've Got Batman in My Basement. It was, in effect, two different visions competing under the same title. The tension eventually slowed production, prompting executive producer Gene McCurdy to bring in Alan Burnett to help guide the show. Luckily, Burnett shared Timm and Radomski's vision. Over time, Derrick and Bright moved on, leaving the series' darker, more sophisticated tone intact. That isn't to say that Derrick and Bright weren't talented, though. Some of their work, such as the Renee Montoya-centric episode POV, is genuinely excellent. It's just that the type of stories they wanted to tell didn't align with the darker, grittier universe that Timm, Radomski and Burnett were building. The story for Cat Scratch Fever was thought up by Sean Catherine Derrick, and she believed that you could smoothly incorporate social messages into popular cartoons. And the issue she wanted to confront was human cruelty via animal testing. And she does this through Daggett and his henchman's treatment of the character of Isis, Catwoman's cat. While Selina Kyle was on trial, her secretary Maven was responsible for looking after her cats. And wouldn't you know it, Maven left a window open and Isis went to look for Selina. Along the way, she was mistaken for a stray, although I doubt that Jesse and Paunch, Daggett's henchmen, paid that much attention. They saw an animal on the streets and just grabbed her regardless of who owned her, and she was taken to Professor Milo's lab. Isis was the standout character from Catwoman's debut, The Cat and the Claw, in my eyes. A loyal and capable cat that said more with her expressions than most characters do with words. So to see her cowering in terror in a cage before Milo grabs her and injects her with a virus was very upsetting. But I find myself wondering about all those other test subjects in the lab. Cage after cage of cats and dogs, all subjected to tests that are cruel, unnecessary, and utterly avoidable. The episode doesn't linger on gore, but it doesn't need to. Just the sight of so many innocent creatures confined, frightened, and in pain is enough to make your stomach turn. These animals didn't choose this life, and yet they're forced to endure it because of human selfishness and malice. There's a relentless sadness that underscores the story, and it's what gives Cat Scratch Fever a moral weight that transcends its uneven execution. What makes it worse is why this suffering is happening. Daggett isn't experimenting in the name of science or discovery. He's deliberately creating a virus so he can sell the cure, turning suffering into profit. The cruelty is calculated, artificial, and completely preventable. In the real world, we've long since known the dangers of chemicals like bleach. You don't need to test them on helpless animals to see the harm, although it does still happen. But here the suffering is amplified by intent, which the episode makes crystal clear. By showing us the animal's misery, the story isn't just delivering a villainous act for Batman to thwart, it's making a moral statement about responsibility, exploitation, and the cost of greed. And there's another test subject I want to highlight, and that's the dog that Professor Milo calls Fido. He really demonstrates that pointless cruelty and how it ruins everything, even though he's just a dog on the surface. When Milo unleashes him on Batman, hopped up on the virus, he's transformed into a slathering, foaming force of pure aggression. The virus exaggerates his strength and ferocity, almost like a superpower, turning a familiar, loyal creature into a nightmarish predator. The chase across the frozen pond is intense because the dog has been warped by human interference. Then comes the vaccine, and with it, an immediate reversal. The once terrifying Fido becomes passive, bewildered, and completely indifferent to Batman. In that moment, the episode makes a clear statement about responsibility. The rage and violence weren't inherent. They were a product of human manipulation and cruelty. Cat Scratch Fever uses Fido to show how mistreatment distorts the natural world, creating monsters out of innocence. It's a moral that resonates beyond the cartoon. Abuse, exploitation, and neglect don't just harm the victim, they warp everything around them, turning the familiar into something frightening. But for all the hideous material in the episode, it has its humour. Daggett's henchmen, Milo, Jesse, and Paunch, are the epitome of incompetence, a trio so staggeringly bad at their jobs that it's almost impressive. Although I am a fan of Jesse's mock swearing. "Kiss off, you dumb cluck," is great. Milo, the brains of the group, created the virus and administers it to the animals, but he's physically inept and relies on Jesse and Paunch, who aren't much better. One trips over her own overconfidence and the other overestimates his own strength, and together they manage to turn every simple task into a disaster. Kidnapping animals? A comedy of errors. Killing Batman? A logistical nightmare. Watching them work is like observing a criminal version of a slapstick routine. Every step forward is 2 steps back, and every plan unravels in spectacular fashion. So it's fitting that artist Kevin Nolan made them resemble the Three Stooges, which is very funny, especially if it wasn't intentional. What makes them even more fascinating, though, is how they reflect Daggett's own flaws as a villain. I've done a whole video about Roland Daggett and BTAS's general contempt for self-described titans of industry, linked to in the info button if you want to hear more. But here's what this episode tells us about him. He surrounds himself with people who can't be trusted to execute even the most basic orders, yet he still expects results. This makes his scheme simultaneously more absurd and more dangerous. In a strange way, their failures underscore the darkness of Daggett himself. The man is capable of true malice, but he's constantly undermined by buffoons, making his villainy almost tragically comic. Just think what he'd be able to achieve if he didn't hire neurotic cretins like Bell and Germs in Feet of Clay. dimwits like Nitro and Crocker in Appointment in Crime Alley, and the three morons from Cat Scratch Fever. Perhaps Daggett intentionally chooses morons for his inner circle. That way, if they get caught, he can point out their obvious cognitive flaws and say they misunderstood what he had asked them to do. Is that a valid legal argument? Are there any lawyers here? Let me know in the comments. Either way, Daggett should have been more discerning if he wanted to actually succeed in Gotham. And I've spent all this time talking about pretty much everything but Batman and Catwoman. This episode is a very important step in developing their relationship. Catwoman had been sentenced to parole, with one of the conditions being that she wasn't allowed to commit crimes dressed as Catwoman anymore. Was that judge saying she could commit crimes as Selina Kyle then? So when Catwoman puts on her costume to go investigate Daggett's lab after she learned that Daggett's lawyers got Jesse and Porch out of jail, she is risking her freedom. Likewise, Batman risks his reputation when he helps her, although given Daggett's involvement, I think that risk was pretty minimal. In their last encounter, Catwoman had helped Batman save Gotham, but when the battle was over, he cuffed her and handed her in. Here, she has technically violated the conditions of her release, but Batman understands her motivations, and I think he condones her behaviour. And really, is her breaking into Daggett's lab all that different to what Batman does on a nightly basis? I think the best moment comes at the episode's conclusion though. When Catwoman found Isis, she was under the influence of the virus and bit Catwoman, infecting her. In the chaos, Isis got free and Catwoman lost her. Batman not only tracked Isis down and cured her, but he went to the effort of secretly lowering her onto Selina's balcony. He knows what it's like to lose a loved one and he doesn't want to distract from their reunion, so he drops her off and then swings away. It's a very touching scene that always hits me in the feels every time I watch it. With the best will in the world, Cat Scratch Fever is no way near the best episode of Batman the Animated Series. Despite its merits, it's probably one of the worst. But, as I always say, being the worst episode of Batman the Animated Series is like being the world's shortest giant. Sure, you're not as big as the rest, but you still tower over other cartoons of the time. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send $1 or $2 my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time. When I return on Friday, it will be the 25th anniversary of Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. So what better time to talk about that version of the character and how he was an allegory for abuse and trauma. So, you know, the usual heavy stuff. And next Monday I'm going back to the streets of Metropolis to discuss the final crossover between the Man of Steel and the Caped Crusader. When the immortal Ra's al Ghul sets his sights on Superman, it turns out that Batman is the only one that can save the day. Hope to see you then.